I'm not talking about the cost of the route. I'm just talking about the cost of implementing the fare system and the rate of recovery associated with the fare system. And what I want to know on the 411 is if we give discounted rates comparable to what we were considering on 412, if the 411 recovers more money than it costs us to collect it. Because I don't know how that, I don't see how that math is going to work. We haven't entered in the disabled population on just take out the veterans. We haven't entered in the disabled population, and we haven't shrunk that down by the ridership percentages that we anticipate shrinking. So at that reduced dollar amount, do we make enough money to cover the cost of collection on the 411 route? Since we have to consider the reduced fares the same for the 412 and the 411, we have to understand the impact on the 411 before deciding on the 412.
For me, I think an honest answer would be that, the money that we collect on fare revenue will be deducted from our reimbursement, so that we will not net any increased revenue from fare collection. But our costs to implement the fare system will be real costs, and so we're going to pay that, whatever that amount is, and so it will be just an additional cost to this organization.
I have a question. When we talk about reduced fares, do we know what the reduced fare is, or is it?
No,
We're just talking
It's
policy
10%
concept
or-
right now.
we don't know.
But
We don't have a definition for what those populations are. We don't know what dollar amount it is, and we don't know how many people there are.
let me ask a question here of Sean. Sean, fares are going to be related to the distance of travel because our costs are related to that. Do you happen to know what the mileage is round trip, let's even one way, from the Camino 412 to Everett before they head back versus the 411? What kind of mileage are we talking about approximately?
We have it on the screens with the yellow highlights. Sean, please point it out. Mileage is on this screen. Round trip miles.
Round trip time in hours.
It's 4 up from the bottom. For 412, it's 67
Okay.
approximately. For 411W, it's 36.
Plus or minus half the distance. So are you telling me, you're not telling me anything, but if we're charging $2 for the 412 and $2 for the 411, does that make sense in terms of our fares for distance and service provided? It would seem to me that you charge more the farther you go. And maybe that would help you in terms of the revenue collection system, because what you're comparing that to is what is the next best alternative to taking the bus. We're competing with convenience, but the rider is also competing with, even though it's cheaper gas, if they drive to Everett, most people will have to pay to park. That is often a bigger cost than the actual cost of the vehicle, but at 54 or 50 cents a mile, you still can't drive and beat the service of the bus going down there. And if you're making these stops and that bus is full, these people most of them are going to a job, and your pie chart shows that most of them on that route are going to the job. I don't think this is a depressed ridership going on the 412. And I personally feel at the stage that we are in, I would support one fare for everybody until we get onto a magnetic system where people prepay. You pay online magnetically. It's a cheaper way to administer fares. And for people who don't do that, they pay a premium, whatever that premium is going to be. It may go from, let's say, $3 is the standard fare, and you go to $4 if you don't have the prepaid card to get on there. And if it's $2 if it's $6, that would be $3 each way on the 412. That's $6 a day times 20 days, that's 20 working days out of a month. That's $120. I'm not sure you can park your car for $120 down there, let alone drive it. So we got to look at the market trade-offs too. People are going to look at it with their wallet. It's going to be convenience and wallet. So we may want to consider starting out, we have one fare, and perhaps with one caveat, and that's for prepaid student cards. When they register for that quarter, they pay, they get a card, they travel with that card, because we get reimbursed something out of that card also. Until we have an identification system, you have one fare, therefore you don't have your drivers trying to sort out who is eligible for a discount, who isn't. At some point, we have to look at, when we started this conversation, we decided that this was a policy decision, whether we're going to have fares or not have fares. We made that policy decision that we are going to have.
No, we didn't.
Okay.
With that, we haven't
Well,
made that.
wait, don't interrupt me.
Well,
Please,
don't
I have the
misstate.
floor.
Well, you
You-
can't say we made a policy decision we didn't make.
Time out, Jill. Let me restate that. It's my understanding that we have a stabilization, 6 points of a stabilization plan, and that included considering charging fares. That's probably a better way to say it. But we did go down that road. That's why we're on this track right now. We are required to charge fares on this route. So we made a decision that we are going to charge
We
fares.
haven't made a decision to charge fares. That's what this decision is.
Okay, you can argue your point when I yield the floor, Jill. Thank you. And
I'll let the other board members answer.
okay, and so we are also looking at a culture change. We are going from no fare to possibly a fare. That's a culture change in Island Transit. And is that where we're really going to go? It was in our stabilization plan, we had those 6 points. Those 6 points are also part of a culture change for Island Transit. And I think the big picture is, are we going to charge the fares? Are we going to stay on the stabilization plan? And are we going to do it in a timely manner? So I'll yield to you, Jill, or anybody else.
I'm gonna jump in. Can I jump
I think
in?
Jackie had her hand.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I've sort of already forgotten a couple of my questions, but one of them was, so somebody mentioned about different fares for different distances. I mean, to me, that seems crazy. I don't know how you'd ever control that. And do other transit systems, if is a fare a fare a fare?
Yes, they do.
You know, right? Okay, so that was one of my questions. The other is, I think, when we're talking about some of the populations, we're talking about reducing fares for, we need to remember that if we do charge a fare and a number of those populations are on Medicaid, we can get some reimbursement from Medicaid. So I just wanted to remind us of that. That's another way to make up some money. And it might not be us that bills Medicaid, but other organizations, like Senior Services and other, right? Yeah.
Can I jump in just a second and say that if we collect money for reimbursements from Medicaid, I'll bet that we need to deduct that from what we get back from the state. So we're really collecting for the state treasurer.
Okay, and, all right, now I'm gonna jump in, because speaking of,
Jack, hold on. Let Jack.
Are you through?
I think I am, but I was looking out here. Is that true about Medicaid, that we would have to deduct that from, you know?
It is my understanding, and this is something that prior to coming to WISTA, I was at Pierce Transit. Public transportation doesn't get reimbursed for Medicaid, but private businesses does.
Right.
This is an NEMT policy, non-emergency Medicaid transportation. So private or nonprofit providers can get up to 100% of the trip reimbursed to them, whereas in most cases, from my understanding, if a public transit agency is providing that, the broker who is finding that trip will actually just give them a bus ticket.
Right.
So in Pierce Transit, shuttle fares was 75 cents. They would just give the Medicaid person a 75-cent ticket. Pierce Transit would recover 75 cents when that cost of that shuttle trip was $53. So I'm not aware of anywhere, we've had lots of state discussions about this, something that we think it's very unfair, but I could be wrong and I'm happy to stand corrected. I don't mean to interject in that conversation.
That's fine.
Okay. For starters, this is new information that any fares collected will be deducted from our state subsidies and grant. So that's new information. So at that point, that almost makes it a moot point. But we're talking about three different things here. We're talking about 411W, 411C, 412. I think we need to break them down and look at them individually. Secondly, I've heard about at least 40 different questions here, so I don't even know that we're ready to make a decision today. And thirdly, this board did not make a policy that we were going to collect fares. Our plan for the future and our goals for the future were to look at the possibility of implementing fares. This board member did not come out and make a policy vote that we were charging fares. So we're going to clarify that right now. We said that we would look at proposing to charge fares. Now, we're sitting here and I'm hearing Paul and everybody's saying that it's a net financial gain to have the 412s. That is not true. Okay? If we make these runs right now, the state grant, if we collect fares and recover at least an 8% or 9% recovery rate, will pay for 3 runs. That's how much $250,000 a year does. Because we did not use any of that money in the first year, we have some money in the pot left that will sit back and pay for a 4th run. That does not mean it's positive money to this firm or to this agency. Because come June of 2017, if that grant is not there, now it's all coming out of Island Transit Fund, every penny. Okay, and we're looking at charging for 412, and we're talking about 411 at the same time. For 412 is one issue, 411 is another, because we've got an agency, another public agency, that refuses to cooperate with us in the charging of fares. So instead of it, say it's a $2 fare, for somebody to get from Camino to Whidbey, it's $12 round trip. So we've got to look at them separately, not as one. So I don't even, from what I'm sitting here listening to today, I don't even think people are sitting here are going to make a decision on anything, because we've got too many questions yet unanswered.
Finished?
Yeah.
Bruce?
I think the point that we're talking about fare systems from Skagit, inability to cooperate with us as far as transfers and everything else. Paul and Jill and I were talking before this meeting about why don't we just run our own bus from here to Mt Vernon and leave Skagit out of it? Then they can let them deal with their own issues.
Yeah, make an express from Whidbey to Camino.
Right. And leave Skagit alone. I mean, if they don't want to play, they don't want to play. Why are we messing with them? Just go from here to Mt Vernon
I've said the same thing several times.
and let them, we don't have to worry about transfers.
Cost-wise, what does that mean in the whole model?
Again, whatever service we run, we bill. And we can bill up to the maximum amount given to us on the grant.
So the grant will cover going directly to Mt Vernon?
I'm not sure.
No stop,
We'll-
straight through?
I think we'll have some sort of match on there if we're maybe doubling our service. We might have to make an adjustment to the runs, or it won't, the grant that we have currently will not cover, given our billing rate, won't cover the full service we can provide. There would be a match, like there was in the past when we were doing the same route.
There's another option out there too, though, that their Skagit's dependent on us to charge a fare in order to get this money. And if we decided, they don't want to cooperate with us, we don't take the money. And all of a sudden, they're out of $250,000 too.
Is that a fact also?
I think that if we don't participate in 412, Skagit can't collect their end of it. And I think if they've been running service over 2 years, they're looking at about $500,000, I think, on their end.
Skagit's more or less holding us hostage.
So
And we could, why don't we try and negotiate with them? You got to pair, you got to pair. You might come out equal here.
Okay. So if we run a bus from Oak Harbor, we make stops within our district. And then, once we leave our district, it's a straight shot to Mount Vernon to the Skagit station, the same way coming back, no stops at March's Point or anything like that. Then we get reimbursed off that grant for that money. And if we get reimbursed, if we run that service without connecting with Skagit at March's Point, are you telling me they don't get the 250 if we run straight through?
No, they're connected to us through 412. The 411 service,
I'm talking about 411.
you know, they're not connected to us on that grant at all.
I think what Bruce was saying that is that since Skagit wouldn't agree to let our riders at March's Point ride for free
Right.
into Mount Vernon, that we say to Skagit, look, we're not gonna do the 412 and you're not gonna get your reimbursement. Or you can let our folks connect at March's Point, put them on your bus for free and take them into Mount Vernon, and we'll happily partner with you on the 412
Okay.
so that you can get
That's
your
what-
reimbursement.
Okay.
And it's $500,000 in Skagit.
Right.
So are we prepared then to make that commitment? I mean, this is going to be a stare down. Are we committed to say we're not going to do the 412?
It doesn't cost us anything to not do it. It costs us something to do it. So in this instance, we have more power. We have citizens who aren't on a bus route right now.
Yeah?
They've already made other arrangements. We have infrastructure that's not in the buses.
Okay.
We have drivers who aren't on the route. We have buses that aren't on the route. So all the costs for starting the route is on us. And it's forcing the fare conversation on a timeline that we may or may not be ready for.
Good
So
point.
Skagit could just not get reimbursed for their connector route from the state. I don't know that that would make long-term goodwill and better friendships, but
It might be a try to sit down with them and see if they're willing to talk about doing things equitable.
it would help in the 411 conversation if we
Yes.
didn't go all the way to
Yeah,
Mount
that-
Vernon.
yeah. Sure.
And just to throw another, if I may, throw another monkey wrench into this, I had a long conversation with Dave Pace, and I had correspondence with Barbara Bailey. And while their support is there for us, they are not getting a warm fuzzy about the 2017 budget. Either in the House or the Senate. So, or not.
So it's possible, next to likely, that it won't even get funded.
They'll support it. Their
They'll
take back to me was start your grant applications process early, have them there by August.
Well,
These conversations
this is
will
a
last.
good conversation. It's a good discussion. So what we do is decide to take no action on item number 1 to start the 412 effective June 6th. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I heard Jill say she's about ready to vote period today. I've already stated, I think, what I'm just sitting here listening is there's an awful lot of questions going around. And I think we need to break the whole conversation into 2 separate conversations. Because the 412 and the 411 do not come from they come from different funding sources.
Except for, and this is where this is where I combine the two when they were separated, but where I combine the two
It's the fair issue.
was the fair issue.
Yes.
That the policy to statements we make around 412 will pre-make the policy decisions around the 411. And if one of our goals is to charge fares on those connector routes, if we make policy decisions on the 412 that makes it financially unwise to put fares on the 411, we need to know that up front.
Right.
So the policy, so part of what's happening here is we're making decisions out of order, right? It's like, okay, we're gonna charge a fare on this route, but there are ramifications for that that affect all of our other routes and operations that we still don't have outlined in front of us. So are we talking about a reduced fare of $1? Are we talking about people who we think are gonna ride for free? We have to think about that on both systems so that we can make the decision on the 412 system, if we're gonna do the 412. That's what I was trying to get to is, you know, and then we're doing a bunch of stops on the 412. The 411 is gonna have to stop at March's Point regardless, because you have all the refinery workers. So then we need to figure out what stops we would make on an extended 411 if we can't get Skagit to participate, we still want to do that route. We need to go into Mount Vernon potentially. What are the costs with that? What are the stops that we're willing to do? I mean, and I apologize for being frustrated, but where I'm frustrated is that we're not getting a linear approach to the decision, so that we're not, when we make one over here, it impacts us over here, and we need to know what that correlation is. And we don't know that right now, and so it's hard to make the first decision because we're going to box ourselves into a corner on the final outcome.
Jill, what specifically do you want the staff to bring forward right now? Your perfect model of bringing forward what information you need as a board to move forward.
I'd like to see realistic ridership numbers on all of the routes. I'd like to see the estimated populations that we think we're going to give a reduced fare to on all of the routes. I'd like the board to decide what those populations are and what the reduced amount would be so that Sean could, you know, if we charge a fare, what are we talking about so that he can do some of that modeling, or Paul can do that modeling. I want to be very clear on the service we're providing under these routes so I know where we're stopping and what we're doing. And that, you know, I want some certainty around the decision. This doesn't need to be a work in progress to the degree that it is.
The pie chart and the graphs that are shown up here, riderships and demographics,
Yeah.
Is not good enough?
Well, I think that we would need to do an estimate of, are we going to do veterans or not? I mean, I would say probably we should
Let's
just say,
just talk about
the pie chart
quantification.
isn't
That's
quantifying all of the
not-
populations
it's
we're
not
talking about.
accurate.
So we said elderly, which I'm assuming is 65 or older. We said youth. We had some conversations about not exempting youth or not, so we would need to decide on that. College students, the same conversation. Are we exempting them or not? We talked about veterans, which may be difficult to quantify, so maybe we leave that out. We talked about people with disabilities of any type. What percentage of our ridership do we guesstimate that would be? 5%, 7%? And then from there, we take the number of riders we think will fall off once we charge a fare, right? And then that determines our model. And I understand the reimbursement part from the grant, but somehow I oversimplified this in my mind. So all I'm looking at in the cost recovery portion is, are we paying for the cost of implementing the fare, first and foremost? If our dollar amount falls below that, if the cost of collecting the fare is more than the cost of the fare we collect, that's just not a good business decision, regardless of what kind of grant reimbursement there is, because the grants are a separate deal. So I just want to make sure that we're taking in more than we're putting out with all of these other policy decisions that we're considering making. So we need to decide who we're willing to exempt and what dollar amount we're willing to exempt them at, or nobody at all.
Okay, then allow me to share this with you. Sean, have you checked with other transit districts? I want to see if your experience is a little different than mine, or can. Number one, this thing about the distance. I have found several transit systems that charge by zones, especially in the bigger ones. You charge by zone. You pay a base fare, you go to the next one, you have to pay to continue on. Okay, some systems have internal transfer systems to keep moving, but they are, you pay by mileage. Most transit systems, is that your experience too? Or do you know?
I know of a couple that charge by zone. I'm not sure how they calculate the mileage, but I've actually went over, them laying a map out and putting their zones over the top of it in colors. And, some of the zones, they only run on certain days of the week,
Right.
Things like that.
Yeah, and then on some of the transit systems, who I have ridden on and talked to some of the people within the system, everybody pays something, including people who use the paratransit system, because it's a subsidized system. And I think we have found out that there's just a collection, a small collection of transit districts that are fare-free. But the ones who I've been curious enough in different parts of the state to find out their fare structure, some of them are just a flat rate. And Justin may have some experience on that, and I would invite him to chime in. Don't give us the 10-minute version, give us the 30-second version.
I don't know of any other transit agency that has free fare, even on their paratransit system. There is zone-based faring for Sound Transit in King County Metro. And then for mileage, for example, my biggest example is intercity transit reaching up into Pierce Transit, where once they get off the freeway in Lakewood, they stop. Tacoma Mall, they stop. Downtown Tacoma, they make several stops. But I don't think that they charge any different from their regular fixed route fare and from their express fare as well. But there are models about paying where you.
But everybody pays. Now, the other thing for us to
Yes.
possibly consider is we establish a system, a fare system, and we fine tune it as we get the electronics, we get a more sophisticated accounting system to track the profile of the people, and so people can apply for electronic passes to ride. Then that's going to give you the demographics, it's going to give you a cost accounting that's tied in really with your ridership. And what we're going through right now is estimate. We have a pretty good estimate. You know, I think the bullseye on our target is probably bigger than it would be if we had an electronic system. But we are currently looking at an electronic system, the route match that we just went through, and we may want to include that in our progression of developing a more efficient route system and a fare system, and then tie in the discount system so it's electronic, and not leaving it up to the driver who made that decision on the road all the time. I mean, we do central accounting. We shouldn't do bus accounting. Okay. So what does we got to move this thing along. What does the board want to do on this item so that we can move along?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just offer a couple real quick thoughts here. On the pie chart, we did intentionally provide a disclaimer at the bottom that this time we do not have the ability to track disabled. We don't have, except on paratransit. We don't have the ability to track Medicaid recipients right now, and we don't have the ability to track veterans. And we do have the ability, we do know what the federal population is, we do know what the Medicaid population is of the county. We know what the elderly, the senior population, well, we've already got the senior numbers, but disabled, Medicaid, and veteran riders, we know on a county level, the population. We don't know what percentage of that overall population does ride or would ride transit. That's where our hang-up is on those groups.
And how do you identify them once they step onto the bus?
Right, we don't. We don't have a means of doing that now. We do have the survey and the internal data collection information available to give us what's on the screen. But I did not want to put up guesses on the screen about Medicaid veterans or disabled.
So it seems like the safer way to move forward at this stage is that if we were interested in charging a fare, we would just say that we're charging fare and not give any exemptions, because we don't know what our model would look like until we have better data. And it's better to go back in and deliver a discount than it is to take a discount away.
Yeah, and that might be why some of these other agencies have one fare for, I know they're column zones going from one town to the next and go beyond that if it's a different fare. But everybody, my understanding, pays one fare.
The second point I wanted to
With the
make,
exception of students with a college ID card
I'm not,
that are
no
being paid.
exception.
Okay, why do we gotta make this difficult? It's either you pay or
Well,
you don't.
Actually,
I
we're
mean,
not on,
it's-
we're not on that topic right now. The topic is, and we're gonna move this along. I think Bruce had a great idea of, let's just try to negotiate with those people. If we don't do the 412, they don't get paid either, and it forces them to make a decision. So at this time, I would entertain a motion, excuse me.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I did have a second point I wanted to make, and it does relate to what you were just discussing. The route that services, in Skagit County, the route that services Marshall's Point, my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, but that route was actually implemented to take our riders from Marshall's Point to Mount Vernon. After we cut that years ago, or several years ago, when we cut back because we couldn't afford to go all the way to Mount Vernon, we cut back to Marshall's Point, and Skagit said, okay, we'll implement a route to get your riders from Marshall's Point to Mount Vernon. So with that, with the service in, they would lose our riders, number one, and I'm not saying that in a positive way, they're losing our riders. Secondly, that route would probably be discontinued because our ridership makes up a large portion of that ridership.
Going all the way.
So that's information.
So we don't have leverage is what you're saying. I mean, basically what you're saying is that we could say, we're not, if you don't connect these people for free, we're not gonna do the 412, and then we would look at going all the way to Mount Vernon anyway. So there's no leverage over them because they would just cut that route.
Right.
I had a comment, if I may. So when we cut that route, going all the way to Mount Vernon, what we found was at March's Point, we were picking up a substantial amount of riders there. And so we were using a big bus, a Gillig. Once we made the cut, we were only using a cutaway, which is a smaller bus. So currently going back and forth, that's enough to service our riders. Our riders would love to go straight to Mount Vernon, but we were getting an overload of passengers that were wanting to get on
Out
at
of,
March's.
those are Skagit passengers
Yes.
riding for free
Mhm.
versus paying Skagit.
Well, that would be simple enough to solve, right? When we stop at March's Point, if you get on, you have $2 to go to Mount Vernon. So now there's no price difference.
Okay, let's take these one at a time. Let's take the 412, item number 1, move this along. This discussion with possible action reinstating the 412 effective June 1. Is there a motion regarding this? Hearing none, going once, going twice. There is no motion on this, therefore there's no action. And so there's not going to need to be a vote. There's no motion. So I have a question for the board. What do you want the staff to do right now relative to this in terms of contacting the other transit agencies so you move this along? Or do you want to just let it die and not do anything with the 412 and not collect the money?
Try to negotiate on the 411 routes to get the free transfer fare into Mount Vernon if we can, and we'll pull the trigger on the 412.
Well, when they implemented it, SKAT took on the Marshall's Point stuff that we were doing. Were they doing it at no fare?
No, they're charging fair.
Okay.
And I would like to add that I've already had a discussion with the executive director at Skagit a couple months ago about the free transfer from Marshall's Point. he took it up with their board, and the board said absolutely no free transfers.
Did they know it was gonna cost them $500,000?
No.
Well, there's the new variable.
Yeah, I think we ought to do that part first.
Okay,
Okay.
so when do you want to come back? When do you want staff to bring this back to us? The next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. You know, time is of the essence on this thing, so,
There's not that much involved over at school. We can
Yeah.
get them to play.
yeah, it's a yes or no, and this is the consequence if it's a no. This is how we can work together if it's a yes. Sean?
We're getting close on our deadline also for implementing that for June 6th as well, because there would need to be staffing and training for that also, so it's something to keep in mind.
Okay, so then should we have them bring it back at our workshop on April 11th? I would be for that. Do I have some head nodding here?
That's fine.
Okay, it looks like, Ken, you got April 11th.
Okay.
That is just a few days away from your, the end of your contract. It'd be really nice to see you come out. The very last thing you did is cut a good deal for the
I was
trip.
hoping it was out sooner than this. That's fine.
Okay, thanks. All right, we're moving off of item number 1. We're moving on to item number 2, discussion with possible action to establish a fair collection policy for the 411W and the 411C and/or the 412. Now, we may have already discussed the 412, so let's keep this focused on the 411. I think for me, you want to do the presentation. Do you have a presentation to audience?
Just add it
Or pretty much?
combined.
You know, I understand that. Just giving him a chance to speak up. He may have
Okay,
something
well, I
to
know, but
say.
we're going right back to the same thing that we just left off on,
Excuse me,
because we were
excuse me,
talking
Rick.
about fares on the 411. We don't know if we're gonna charge fares
Rick.
on the 411 till we get a deal with the people at Skagit.
You're talking over your board members, so let's use some consideration, please.
Well, let's use common sense.
So
Thank you, Rick.
I think what I would make a motion to support is that we consider the fair collection policy on the 411W and the 411C to reflect our ultimate decision on the 412.
I hear what you say, but we usually start out with an agenda item allowing the executive director to do a presentation. I didn't even get a chance to ask him if he had a presentation before we kind of chime in. On the 411, would you recommend that we wait until we have the discussion with the other agencies regarding the 412 before we take any action in this item? What would be your recommendation?
Well, we have the information available right now on the charts you just saw for 412. If you would want to take the time at this time to go back and see the 411 numbers and the recovery ratios and the revenue numbers, we have that incorporated in the same charts that we have for 412. We just had 412 highlighted. 411 information is included in the same charts if you'd like to quickly go back through those.
Does anybody want to go through that for the 411? A yes or a no?
I personally think that the fares ought to be waiting, just what you just said, we'll get 412 settled, whether,
Okay.
and let it, and find out what they're gonna do with transfers, if not, then that kind of helps make the decision.
Okay.
I would, then I can agree with that. I just wanted to make the board aware that those numbers are available if you'd like to look at them.
Could we get that presentation? Could you send that to the email, please? Yeah, please. Thank you.
So what would the board like to do regarding taking possible action on this item? Just take just a no action thing?
Just table it until we get the response from 412.
Yeah.
So then there takes a motion to do that, then if you want to table it. Anybody make a motion to table this until we get the,
I'll make the motion to table it until we find out what's going on with 412.
okay, Bruce Allen made a motion to table item number 2
Second.
regarding the 411. Gordon Johnson made a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of tabling item number 2, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried unanimously. We're on item number 3, and this is discussion, scheduling, and deliberation regarding the selection of the permanent executive director. Ken, this particular item is,
Is this in addition to Wednesday?
We already have that sample?
But it was my understanding, Mr. Chair, that we were going to be deliberating on the executive director position immediately following the interviews, which would be Wednesday, March 30th, at approximately 1:00 p.m.
okay,
So
we
this-
have, excuse me, we have on this agenda item an executive session. You want to go into executive session to discuss anything regarding the selection or any of the resumes? Do you want to go into executive session now or not?
It's not on the agenda.
Selection of a permanent, excuse me, I must have read the wrong page on this thing. We do not have an executive session.
We have scheduled in the press that we're going to be holding a special meeting on March 30th to interview candidates for the executive director position. It was my understanding that the board, at the end of those interviews, was going to go into executive session and discuss and deliberate, and then come out into open session and vote on an executive director position. I don't see any need to schedule another meeting.
All right, so item number, excuse me, go ahead,
This
Bruce.
is all done up.
Yeah, so we've got a schedule on this thing.
So what this is for is if you wanted to sleep on it, then you can vote to have a special meeting on Thursday to do the final.
Excuse me, I just want to clarify. Has the board made a motion to have a special meeting at 8:30 on Wednesday?
Yeah.
March 30th? Has that motion been made?
Yes, it's already made, approved, and publicized in the press. That was at the last meeting. That's in the minutes that we approved in the consent agenda today.
So I guess my question is, what's the purpose of this?
I have no idea.
Just as Megan said,
I just-
if we think we might not be able to make a decision there and then want to continue the next day, I could, right? That was-
Because it's a special meeting, we have the 24-hour notice. If you needed that, I need to know if you think you might want it, because we can always cancel it. But if you think you're gonna need the night to think about it, so that you could come out and say the following day, in open session, what, who you're gonna pick.
Now, I guess my
Okay.
question is, just to be absolutely sure about this, is what does the notice say right now?
There is no notice, this would be a vote on whether or not you wanted to have a special session on the
He
31st.
just told me that.
Well, there's a notice for Wednesday, but not for
Yeah.
Thursday.
That's what he's asking.
Oh, this is
Yeah.
Thursday.
Right, this is an additional one if needed, we just have to vote
Oh,
on it
okay,
to
you
have
wanted
it.
an additional day.
Yeah, if you wanted it, so you just have this language here, if you so choose. If you think no, then you just forget it.
What would we need a special session?
It would be if you wanted to sleep on it after
Sleep on our
Wednesday,
Decisions like this?
after your interviews, if you just needed time to think about it as individuals.
I mean, I understand that, I don't think it's a bad idea.
It's just to give you, it's just because
I know,
we need to
I know
have
you
it.
have plans, but I.
I'm not saying, I'm saying that we already discussed this at our last
I know,
meeting.
Rick, I know. I'm just saying also, sometimes you interview people and they are very, very close and you do need some time to think about it.
This was a
That-
safety valve.
Safety
Right,
valve.
exactly, and I can go either way.
Just to cover our bases, my preference is to have the interviews, and I think for the information that I have, that I would like to continue on and make the decision that day. Something may come out of the meeting that you go, oh, wait a second, I don't know about this. I can't imagine that happening, but at least it was a safety valve for the public advertisement in the event that we chose to do that. Then our bases are covered. So at this particular time, we will take no action on item number 3. and we will move forward into public comments, input and comments. If anybody has any interest in that, you have 3 minutes. And
I just want to make one thing clear. The deliberations are going to be in open session. The interviews will be in closed session.
that is correct.
I want to
Yes.
make sure that everybody understands.
Right.
There's been 2 articles, both for the University of Washington and for Washington State, that they've been criticized as to how the selection process
Right.
is. I want to make sure that the selection process here does not have any secret deliberations. Okay?
And I appreciate that, and I think all of us understand that and plan to have the interviews, and then there will be no decisions made or actions taken during the executive session. Those actions will be taken in the public meeting. Okay? Ready to move on to the final item for public comments. You have 3 minutes. It has to be something that's within the jurisdiction of Island Transit. And we also discourage people of making critical comments about personnel. If people have something that they want to say about Island Transit personnel, they can submit those in writing to the board or to the administration. Gail?
And I'll talk specifically about the 411W, because like I said, I haven't ridden the 411C except for one time. But yes, the previous 2 years that we received funding, I believe it was 2.3 million, and that was for so many round trips per day from Oak Harbor Station to Mt Vernon. This time, we got the same amount of money, but we reduced no Saturday service, we reduced the times out there and what have you for that. It's we're saving over $1 million by just going to March's Point. So hopefully that will come into the realm here some way. That route's paid for basically in a matter of speaking between Oak Harbor and Mt Vernon. We're lucky enough to get traded off at March's Point. But it should be the funding. We're saving money by not going to March's Point. That's one way to look at it, I guess. And then the only other thing about we'll talk about the route match again. Well, I'll wait until you guys, if we ever do that for a budget thing, because it was never approved in the budget. We want to talk about the stabilization plan, the 6 points of the plan, trying to get on track, trying to build reserves, everything that the board is trying to do to put us back on track. Yet we talked about a $40,000 route match thing a couple meetings ago, and it wasn't in the original budget, but we want to go ahead and spend money on it. It just doesn't seem like it's very financially sound event.
For your comments, any other comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been gone the last 4 months, so I haven't been around to make comments one way or the other. But I am back. I want to talk about the culture that we've all come into over the last 3-4 years. And a lot of that's been touched on today. I think the culture that we're striving for is to get this business operation that we're involved in on the positive trail to being successful. Okay, where public transportation is never going to pay for itself. It never has, it never will. But our goal has always been to go in that direction. And it's unfortunate that we're still where we're at. But I just want us to remind ourselves that everything can't be free. And I've heard a lot of things about, and this operation has always been, we get a grant for this, we get a grant for that, and this and that. Well, we've already found that those grants are not always there to come in to bail us out. The numbers that they're showing as being positive in the bank, okay, won't even buy one bus. All right, so I think we still need to go down that same road of how do we become self-sufficient where we can buy the buses, buy the vehicles when we need them. Okay, take the action that we need, to supply our customers with transportation, but do it in a positive way. And I don't see it going in that direction yet. I've seen a vast improvement over everything that's happened with Island Transit. That's a very positive thing. I've heard more from legal counsel today than I've heard in 5 years. I think that's a positive thing. And I like the discussion that's involved with the action that was on the agenda today as well. I think that's positive. But our goal is stop relying on getting these grants because those grants aren't always there, as we all know. So how do we get from here to there and not rely on the grants to supply the vehicles and the equipment to maintain this building or anything else? That's what we need to be looking at.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Any other comments before we close this meeting out? Hearing none.
Excuse me, this executive session that we're talking about having, or this meeting we were talking about having, we have to give how many hours notice, 24-hour notice? So if we don't do it, if we don't, we can cancel it without any knowledge, without any.
I have to let the press know and I'll post that it's canceled, but,
But it didn't have to be 24 hours ahead of it.
well, no, that's my understanding. Once it's
You
posted.
can cancel anytime.
Mhm.
Okay. Would it not be a good idea to schedule it and then cancel it in case you want it later?
I think so. In this particular notice right here, I thought this was the notice going forward where it says May.
May is, that was your,
That was the trigger word right there.
so whether or not, if you choose to do it, you have to vote to
Yeah.
do it. But that was just kind of, sort of a pre-notice that it might happen, so that people were not too surprised if it did happen. But it's not official, which is why
I
it
think it'd
says
be a good
May.
idea to schedule it and then cancel it. If we go-
I would agree with that.
Yeah, cover the base, let's move along. We can always cancel it. So, I don't think we need to make a motion.
Well, we have it here, yeah.
Dude,
So
there's language.
I would make a motion to a scheduling of deliberation regarding such from the executive.
Okay, I mean, I'll second
All
that.
right, so Ms. Henderson made a motion to schedule a special meeting that may be held,
I wouldn't have made it,
just,
you're scheduling.
okay, you're right, okay. To be held on Thursday, March 11 at 1
No,
p.m.
March 31st.
Excuse me.
March 31st.
March 31, this says 1 p.m. Is that what we want to do, 1 p.m., or do our regular 9:30?
Why was that? I think there was a reason. You can make it whatever time.
How did 1 p.m. get selected?
It
don't
might have
know.
been because that's when, sorry, it might have been because that's when,
For the 24-hour
yeah.
window?
So, yeah, so that we figured you'd be done by 1 with the interviews,
Yeah.
so that would be, it's not
Pretty
it,
sure.
be short.
Well, I'm not confused here.
I don't know why I put mine.
Why do we need 24-hour notice? We're scheduling it now. So don't we need 24 hours notice from now, and then we could just cancel it
Well, you
anytime?
have to have another meeting. You have to make a motion now. If you want to come back 24 hours before the meeting, you can, but this is
I
giving
see.
more than 24 hours.
I see.
You have to have a special meeting to make the motion.
Got it.
Yeah.
So let
So
me,
whatever time,
okay,
whatever
let me
time
repeat
works
the
for
motion
you.
here then, Jackie. The motion is to have a subsequent PTDA special meeting to be held Thursday, March 31 at 1 p.m. at the Transit Operation Administration Building. And it was second
And that's to deliberate and select the executive.
for the purpose of deliberating and selecting an executive director. Kind of modified her motion.
Okay.
I would agree with that motion.
Okay. And you're still with the second, okay, and Bruce Allen made the second on that. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
So,
Okay, there's, the motion carries, one abstention for Mr. Hamlin.
Oh, he
was
was
there
in-
an extension that was negative?
Excuse me. Go ahead. A no. I gotta re-plug my brain or something this morning, jeez. Any other action here that we need to take? We're off the hook.
I just, real quickly, and I don't know if you've been in fact in contact with folks from Tomato, but I think I've resolved, I spoke with several business leaders over there at Terry's Corner, And they understand now that there is facilities for the public where they are at, and that our facilities are for the transit drivers only. And if they don't like them coming into their businesses, they can post a sign that says stay out of their business. In that case, it's good.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
The motion?
And Jill made the motion to adjourn, second by Mr. Allen. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. And it's unanimous. We're out of here. Thank you all for coming. Yes, ma'am. I recognize the hand back there.
Did you forget about me? I'm here to state my...
Pardon?
I'm here to state my cause.
Who wants to speak?
Public comment.
We had the public comment period open, and I didn't see your hand back there. I apologize.
My name is on the list, so I thought it's...
I just really apologize to you. I
I'm
just
fine,
did
I
not see your
didn't hear
hand.
anything anyway, I have to hearing aids, but I would like to tell you, I'm very upset about my deal with your wonderful company, because I have been served since 2010 in such a wonderful fashion, and now I'm getting a letter telling me that from July 1st on, I will not be served anymore because I am 1.3 miles away from a regular bus stop. And that means to me that my life is coming to crash immediately because I won't know how to get to my house from the regular bus stop to my house. It is 1.3 miles. And you are only giving me 3/4 of a mile. So I am a half a mile away from your regulation where I should be. I'm making no sense now. I'm all upset because I'm shaking all over. But anyway, I would like for you to grandfather me in, if possible at all. It's very easy to get from the regular bus stop to my house. It's no woods or anything, it's just a straight up the hill. If you could grandfather me in, that would make a big difference to me. My connection with your company is mostly once a week that I go to a class from my house to Oak Harbor, that the bus takes me, and then maybe another one-time ride with you in a week. So if you could see me put in on if you could grandfather me in your organization, that would be the will to me. So that's why I'm here for today. I wrote a letter to Dee, and she asked me to come here instead of writing a letter, but she has a letter stating my whole story. So if you would like to see that, I'm sure Dee could forward it to you at some point.
Mr. Chair, I would like to put this topic on for a special workshop sometime.
Well, we have adjourned,
I know we have,
but I think it's appropriate for a board member to ask, and it doesn't take action
Right.
for the staff to put that on one of our upcoming meetings or workshop.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I already talked with operations staff before our meeting, and he's working out numbers for us, and it's coming to a work session.
Do you understand that?
we will be considering it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I didn't see your hand when we had the public
I think she
comment.
didn't put it up. I think she signed in and she signed.
Oh.
I voted.
Yeah.